Hi, I'm Alex Williams with the New Stack with our series of interviews from the OpenStack Summit in Austin, Texas, brought to you by GoDaddy. GoDaddy is transforming itself with the development of a new stack infrastructure and an OpenStack service for its legions of small business customers. Learn more at GoDaddy.com. Hey, it's Alex Williams with the New Stack here at the OpenStack Summit. Today, we're doing podcasts here, and I listened to this other podcast on Arrested DevOps, one of my favorites, and JJ Asghar was interviewed, and he had a lot to say about OpenStack that I didn't really know about that well. And so I thought I'd ask him here today, and so here we are. JJ, nice to have you here.
Thank you, and it's nice to be here too. Yeah, I appreciate it. The Arrested DevOps podcast was originally supposed to be out there to get me my word out for running for the board. And
right.
I was trying to, get people doing it. But unfortunately, it kind of came out a little bit later than it was supposed to. So it kind of didn't have the effect that I was expecting. But it's good that you listened to, and I would love to talk about the OS Ops project that we've got off the ground.
Yeah, so as I recall, the premise really behind OS Ops is that we have lots of people who are building OpenStack, and the people who actually are using OpenStack are a growing constituency, and they don't have the same representation though necessarily. And your effort is to provide more of a voice for them, and doing that through some changes actually in the foundation itself. Perhaps you could just explain it, what OS Ops is.
Sure. So it kind of clicked the other day when we were looking at, or I should say at the app that we come with the for this actual convention. You look at the O and the little arrows that goes around.
Yeah.
People normally have users and devs on there. And there's this O in the middle. Believe it or not, if we put PS behind it or beside it, it spells ops.
Yes.
They're the ones who sit between the users and the development team.
Totally.
Right? They're the ones who actually build these clouds.
Right.
And to your point, they don't have a collective voice. People report bugs, they report issues, but they don't have representation that are willing to work in the, what's a good way of putting it, the paradigm and the governance that is an OpenStack.
So tell us about that paradigm and the governance that is OpenStack and how it works now.
So the short answer is operators have a lot of things to do. They have a ton of stuff to do, and they have to care about their OpenStack cloud.
Right.
They find an issue, and there's already a gating thing. To report an issue inside of the OpenStack community, you have to have a Garrett, you have to launch ID, you have to do all this stuff, and that scares a lot of operators away. It really does, because it's all this overhead that they don't have time to do because they're just trying to get their thing to work.
Right.
OS Ops is a place where they can come to, where it has a very, very low barrier to entry, where they can come to this representation group, and we can go advocate for their issues. And also, the original goal, which is one of the goals of OS Ops, is to get ATC, or the Authorized Technical Contributor. I can never remember the actual acronym, which if you look on the little stamp, the little A dude. Also for operators, because they can't get ATC because they don't contribute patches to core OpenStack. So we're trying to build a big tent project which has the TC acknowledgement to get ATC, which is, I know a lot of analogies, right? But then they can go to their companies, and as an operator of a cloud, they can say, I'm now providing to the OpenStack community, which in turns gets them under the budget of OpenStack initiatives inside of their companies, which gives them the ability to come to these conferences, which gives them the ability to use the resources that normally just development people have more so. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And so how do operators get represented now without the OS Ops?
Just like building your own OpenStack cloud, it is extremely fragmented. And this OS Ops is a project that we are trying to create a catch-all umbrella so we can, as operators who run the cloud, have the ability to have one-stop shop. We have the wiki, we have our own projects, we have repos, like a very low barrier to entry that you can commit to, that we have, a certain level of expectations. And also, as an operator, if I went to you and said, okay, let's go build a cloud.
Right.
We will find ourselves building the same tooling that someone else has already built, just with a little bit different flavor.
Right.
I pick on this group, and I apologize for doing it, but this is my perfect example.
Sure.
Right? So there's a glance bug out there where if you are trying to use, if you have multiple hypervisors, right, and you have a glance image, you will eventually, and I'm the chef guy, you will eventually write an Ansible playbook that caches those glance images on all your different hypervisors. You will write this this playbook at some point. Why is this not in the code? Why do we have to, as operators, figure this problem out at some point? Because you need to cache all your images on your hypervisors. How else are you going to get it from your main glance store, right? So you end up figuring this out as you're building your cloud, and you do this. So that's what OSOps is there for, is to give you that tool chest already to say, you're going to get to this point. You're going to need this. So here is a playbook that you will find yourself doing. So, and this has been tested by multiple people. It has the community behind it. And if you report back to it, you get ATC, even better. Well, not quite yet, but will be.
So, and so with OS Ops, what are you doing? So what is OS Ops going to do to mitigate this?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, it's a lot of, we have the groundswell. I use this term a lot, but it's true. We have the operators community behind us. We have the technical committee behind us. We have the user committee behind us. We even have the foundation behind us, because we were able to create a grassroots organization that can now represent a group of people that usually are very fragmented, which is amazing. But the problem is we need to now start connecting the dots. We need people from the development side now, and also the user committee side, to come and have conversations with us as a representation group. It's become, I guess the right term is a gentleman's agreement, where we have now decided that we are going to champion this and run with this. But the challenge is now we need, and one reason why I was very happy that you're willing to let me talk here, is I need more people to know about it, and more people willing to come to our meetings, more people willing to get on the operators mailing list and have the conversations around what the operators care about, because that's who run your clouds, right? It's the operators, it's not the developers, no offense, but we're the guys who actually have fingers on keyboards making those businesses happy by using OpenStack.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. I have to say that as a longtime journalist, the users are like very elusive because they're so fragmented.
Now, I'm going to be very pedantic here, but the term users is a loaded term inside the OpenStack community.
Okay.
Right.
So okay, yeah.
So there's the users kind of fall underneath a lot of different things.
They do.
Operators are a very specific group of people, where they're the ones who actually run your cloud. A user could, in theory, write an application against OpenStack Cloud and never actually run the cloud per se.
So who are the operators? How do you categorize them? I mean, they're running the systems, but can you define them any more than that?
So, in my mind, and this is the boundary or the line, however you want to describe it, is people talk to an API to talk to OpenStack, right? Those people who talk to the API most likely are users. Okay. Operators control that API or run the application that runs the API up to the point of the operating system, and then developers write the API. Does that make sense? Right. So they're the ones who actually train runners, not train runners, engine drivers. Right. They're the engine drivers of the OpenStack cloud.
So what kind of jobs do these people have in organizations?
9 out of 10 times they're just system engineers or system admins or DevOps engineers is the new term, right? Right. And they're the ones who, day in and day out, make sure your cloud is up and running in the HA configuration with your iSCSI backends and all that jazz. And they're the ones who run that stuff. And they have unbelievably complex, unbelievably challenging jobs. Yeah. And when they find a problem inside of OpenStack, they try to report it. Their heart's in the right place because their job is on the line. They found a problem, they fixed it. They want to give it back to, as I like to say, their future selves, because they might run into this problem again. Right. Well, they try to give it back, and no joke, it's a very complex issue to just get your foot in the door of the OpenStack community. So if they know that they can come to the OS Ops team or group or whatever we're calling ourselves, and we're the representation of that, then they can know, oh, we'll just go find JJ. and JJ will go advocate that issue that basically put my job on the risk, on the line, because that's my job, is the OpenStack cloud. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. But the operators, they're overlooked in other communities too.
Absolutely, but that was the challenge, is that most people in general have always kind of just, oh, it'll be fine, DevStack, it works in DevStack. That joke when the little XKCD, well, it worked in DevStack.
Yeah.
For, I think it's from DreamHost. It's a great joke, but people's actual jobs rely on building these things. And yes, they're not usually represented in most places, and this is what we're trying to change. We're trying to change to give another representation to be able to say, yes, we acknowledge that the people who do this thing do that thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We originally had, and I don't think we're doing it anymore, but we used to have mid-cycle meetups for operators, which was 3 months into the cycle, where we would all go for 2 days to have a nice thing run by Tom Fifield. I can't say his last name. Fifield? Tom. Anyway, and it was great. You would actually see all these people who run OpenStack day in and day out come together, discover that they all have the same problems. They all have the same situations. They've all written the same tooling. And I've been to 4 of these, right, when they were running. And it was the same conversations over and over and over. And I was fed up in Palo Alto, which was the last one. And I was like, I'm going to just champion this thing, because we literally complain about the same thing over and over and over again. We need to fix this. And you know what? As the OpenStack chef guy, which my job was, as chef is the thing, we make things delightful. My job was to make the chef environment delightful inside of OpenStack's community. In turn, operators use chef. I was able to justify using my resources and my cycles to make it as delightful as possible. Mm-hmm. And I ran with it as far as I could. And I just need more people behind me now.
So there was an OS Ops events here, weren't there?
Yes, so Monday, which was yesterday, we had actual operators meetups, and we had a lot of good conversations where, no joke, we had actual development, like PTLs of the different development projects come into the meetups and just start listening, and you could see that the light clicked. Like, they're like, oh, so these are the guys that when I find a bug that I need to tell about the operators of this world, I can now go to OS Ops, and I trust that they will federate it throughout the operator community. We're that touch point. As what's the saying, one throat to choke, right?
Yeah.
We're the one throat to choke for operators. Huh. And Rajan Bajan, which is, I believe his name is, I know him through IRC. I believe it's Joseph Bajan. He's the spirit leader right now of the OS Ops project, and he's doing an amazing job.
Where is he out of?
VeriSign?
Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, I know him as Rajan Bajan. I know people by IRC, right? When I actually meet them in person, their face is like, I see the name.
So what are some examples of platforms that have been, effective in bridging like these operators and the actual developer communities that are making those bug fixes?
So Chris Langdon, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. He works for GoDaddy. He actually had an amazing thing that happened in Tokyo.
Oh, yeah.
He got one of the operators working groups together, and he created a list of patches that downstream were doing to fix problems that should have been upstream. And it turns out only the majority of people in that room were operators. And we actually had a curated list after an hour and a half of why are these patches not being pushed through? I had to do this. Like, it was more than 3 or 4 people would be like, yeah, I do that in my cloud. Why is this not pushed? Why is it not pushed forward? Just that visibility alone was one amazing step forward. So we had some consensus to say that we should go back to the different projects to say that we need to fix this.
So did things get fixed?
Unfortunately, no.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Well, it's because the champion dropped his flag. Okay. And it happens.
That's another problem.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah,
you got to have these people standing up there with those flags. Otherwise, the problems don't get fixed.
And we are building bridges right now, right? We're trying to build a path. We have multiple islands, for lack of a better analogy. We're trying to build bridges across them as operators. And yes, Sometimes bridges fall apart and you need to rebuild them. But at least now that we have a framework to talk about this stuff and we have a way to invigorate the groundswell, we can move forward. We just need to keep pushing.
It's an interesting story because, you know, there's a lot of passion here, you know, among, for instance, the operators who really believe in their jobs, right? There's developers who are passionate about building things, right? But it seems to be, you know, almost a problem in how open source communities deal with, you know, bug fixes, for example, right? I mean, it's like, and there's some deep roots here.
Absolutely.
Right? You know, and like how bug fixes are taken care of. Are you seeing any innovative methods start to like emerge where like we could those worlds can find, you know, more integrated environments? I mean, because if you think about it, really, like we hear so much about continuous delivery, and continuous integration, and full-on pipelines, right?
Sure.
You hear so much about containers, but when you start really asking questions about these kinds of things, you realize, you know, it becomes quickly apparent that developers view containers much differently than an operator would.
Absolutely.
Right? A developer views them as application packaging, right? You know, and
that's
you
a
know,
loaded question. That's a loaded statement right there.
Yes,
packaging is a loaded statement.
Exactly. And the operators have different views on how containers can be used, for instance, in the plumbing of the infrastructure itself.
Absolutely.
So you automatically have like these
Factions.
disconnects in like just in terms of how people actually understand concepts. I'm just wondering, like, you know, are we going to start to see really the, you know, obviously there seems to be a need for new platforms to do these, to make these changes more quickly.
Absolutely.
But what are those? You know?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But, so you touched on it briefly a second ago, and I actually want to highlight the governance model that we have in OpenStack, right? Where the governance model, this is my personal opinion. Yeah. So I might go off on the rails here. But the governance model was originally designed for 9 projects, right? Or 9-ish projects for your OpenStack cloud. Right now with the Big 10, we have, last count I saw was 58, right? So the actual governance model is having scaling issues. Okay. Right? But luckily, we've made enough of our arms waving around the place. And Edgar Medina from Workday has stepped up and become part of a representation group, or he's part of the operators group, but he's now part of the UC, right, the user committee. So now we actually have actual representation, someone who's actually run an OpenStack cloud, not a user of an OpenStack cloud, like to build off the APIs, or a developer of a project inside of OpenStack. But we actually have someone who's actually run an OpenStack cloud who says, this is how we've done this. These are the what's a good term? The glue that we've used to build this stuff, and these are the problems we have. That voice, and that was kind of what I was trying to get at the Arrested DevOps conversation, trying to get on the board, was my big thing was I represented the users, right? Like we are the people who actually, the operators. Thank you. I represent the operators as the people who actually run the cloud. The board is, I mean, no offense to the board, but they don't have the representation of those people, right?
So what happened with your campaign?
Yeah, it fell apart.
Okay.
But I tried, I really did, and
there's other elections.
Yeah, and I'm really happy, like, as an operator, as someone who I try to be involved in this community, to have Edgar step up and be on that UC alone is a huge step for our community. Like, I respect the developers and the work they do, right? I'm not ragging on them, but they work in a bubble, right? As long as it works in their world, it's cool, but they don't have to ever actually put all the pieces together. Like they build Lego pieces, right? Yeah. That's the beauty of OpenStack. You get a bunch of Legos, you build the cloud that you want to build.
And they just want to throw it in production.
Exactly, and that's all they care about, right? And I respect that. Like their little Lego piece is amazing, but when you try to build a business off of it, if your Lego pieces don't fit together just right, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. So how's that affected OpenStack deployments inside organizations?
That's a great question, and if you, we had the cross-team deployment working group session a little while ago, just before lunch, and no joke, it was every major deployment, including Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Cola, Triple O, all that. No joke, on the whiteboard, I wrote down on the sign saying, "This is not a religious war," because people get very, very passionate about this stuff. What we are trying to do now as a development working group, for lack of a better term, we're going to try to find collaboration between us to build integration tests, to build something. So all our deployments now, we have a standard agreed upon testing framework, which will probably be some Tempest tests or something like that effect, that we can now say that yes, this passes all these things. So Chef, Puppet, Cola, Docker, all those jazzes, Ansible, they all have, we all agree that they have passed an ability to spin up a Nova instance. Right now, we don't have any of that collaboration, and we have an opportunity to build that with this cycle alone. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this stuff.
So have you've been involved in building OpenStack clouds, I imagine. What are some of the problems that you've come up against? I mean, name 3, or I don't care, 1 that comes to mind.
Well, actually,
there's so many. I'm
yeah,
sure.
well, that's the reason why I try to pick on one,
Yeah.
which is that glance
Yeah.
issue, right? And it's a perfect one that everyone runs into.
Right.
And I know it's the same hashing, I hash that same story over and over again, but it highlights the whole problem, right? Because it shows that you build a cloud, you find yourself having more than 1 or 2 hypervisors. All of a sudden, you're shipping out images across the board, and then all of a sudden, you haven't touched that hypervisor for a while, so it drops the cache.
Right.
And then your buddy who's decided to spin up a machine hits that hypervisor. He's like, why does it take 6 days, or not 6 days, but why does it take 45 minutes for my image to come up? But then I do it again, and it shows up in 2, right? Like, it's because, I had to transfer the Ubuntu image across the wire to this thing. Now I have to think about networking. I have to think about blah, blah, blah. Then you write that Ansible playbook, for instance, that starts caching those images all on your hypervisors. Why is this not built inside of Glance? Because for whatever reason, no one's championed it through the Glance project. Because operators saw this problem, they used, baling wire and duct tape to fix the problem. And that's what we're trying to do. This also highlights those types of issues that we write, that we can go back to the projects and say, hey, you should probably fix this over here.
JJ, thank you very much for taking some time to talk with me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I will have to stay in touch. It's something we're interested in following, and maybe we need to do some data research around the ops the ops community, to get a good picture of what's happening there. So we should follow up on that.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. All right. Thanks a lot. We'll be back soon. Bye-bye.